Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Hi, it sounds good.
It's good.
That'll work. We got people coming in. Shalom, Mora Elisheva. Good to see you. Hello, Nancy. Hello, Kelly.
Hi, Kelly. Hi.
It's good to see you guys.
I was muted. Hello, Rabbi Kornberg.
Hello, Elisheva.
Hi, Elisheva.
I miss
Hi.
seeing you.
Who's that?
It's Diana.
Hi.
Hi, sweetie. You must not be on gallery view, or you don't recognize me.
Yes,
Hi,
I do.
Diana.
I do. Yes, I do. I do.
Look what I found in my book, on my bookshelf. Oh, you can't see. You had mentioned that the JPS is, you had mentioned that, and I didn't even realize I had it, but
You had it.
apparently,
Beautiful.
Noah, can you see it? Noah got it when he had his confirmation, and I'm probably going to be the first one to happily crack this binder on the book of Job. Let me
Yes,
tell you,
I've been using.
it's a good thing I'm taking the positivity bias class tomorrow.
Right.
Yes, I'm using Miriam's Tanakh.
Oh,
Yeah, we've got a few here. I don't think my kids have been open any more than anyone else's.
I use mine every Shabbat now, or mine.
when they
Miriam's,
when they
whatever.
say door la door, they don't realize it's, we benefit from what they get.
Right.
Hello, Mike. Good to see you. Hello, Rona. It's good to see you guys.
Hi, Rabbi. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
We'll wait another minute or two just for people to get on. We've got 13 on right now. All right, we'll wait another minute or two. I'm assuming nobody had any problems logging in.
No.
Nope, no problems at all.
No.
Yeah, Diana, mine's Morgan's because that's the only JPS one I have.
Was that from
Hers
her?
is a mini.
Was that from her confirmation?
No, bat mitzvah.
Oh,
It's a mini size,
that's
so
what
it's page,
that's what this is. That's why the
page
old.
1657.
Thank you. That's why the old reading glasses had to go on.
That's because you're old.
I am old. Thanks, Peter.
That's not nice.
Come on, let's not talk
You
about
should-
age, please.
You should. That's okay. You should hear the things I say to him.
All right. Well, we've got a big class today, so I want to get started. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to mute everyone to begin with. Just remember that if you would like to ask a question, go and find the raise hand button. It's either in reactions or in participants. It kind of depends what version of Zoom you have. They've changed it a couple of times, but raise your hand. You can also do the chat if you need to. And let's get started. So the book of Job, session 2 is where we are at today. And we are going to continue actually what we started last week to really look at the text. So this week and next week are going to be text-focused classes. And there's no way that we're going to be able to read all of the text that's there. I will say again, I very much recommend, if you are interested in what we're reading, read the book of Job. Go ahead and find it. It's 42 chapters, so it's a long book, divided up over a few weeks, maybe. Divided up over a month. Read a chapter a day, or 2 chapters a day, and be able to see it. Part of what we're going to acknowledge is there's a lot of repetition. Not repetition in the exact words, but repetition in concept. So the dialogues will all change. and the things that will be said will all change. But the pattern of the dialogue, of the friend saying something and Job's response and the back and forth, are all the same all the way through. So really and truly, this class is going to be about some highlights and just getting a sense of it, and then going on from there. Okay. Thank you, Diana, who put into the chat the link to Safaria for anyone who wants to find Job in Safaria. I mentioned it last week. All right, so let's get started. This week, we are going to look at texts that are going to focus us on really three different things. We're going to look at the end of the prologue that we started. We're going to look at Job's first monologue, where he this is his first response. And we're going to start to look at the dialogue with the friends and sort of see how that plays back and forth. If you remember from last time, the dialogues are by far the biggest section of all of this. So we'll just pop through a little bit of it, and then a lot of the philosophical gravitas of this book happens in the monologues and obviously at the end. So that's where we'll be spending a little bit more of our time as we go through. Any questions before we get started today? All right, so let's start with our text. We last week started, before we get to here, let me give some, last week we read the first chapter and we saw literally the deal with the devil, right? We saw Hasatan, the accuser, making a deal with God. And the beginning of chapter 2 carries that on to the next level. So Job, we saw at the end of it, said, and he didn't, after all this, he didn't sin. The beginning of chapter 2, we sort of see this back at the bar again, right? Between God and Satan. And God asks the same question. Where you been? And Satan says, I've been out and about going around. And God says, have you seen Job? And the same pattern goes again. This time, Satan is given even more power to create distress to Job. What changes is at the end of the second chapter, we finally see the appearance of Job's friends. And that's where I want to start today. And so I am going to ask for volunteers, as I have before. I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to go backwards, actually, on the text this time. So I'll start with Mike. Frank, sorry. There's two Michaels today. And have you start, and then we'll kind of go up through my boxes.
Okay. Job 2:11-13. When Job's three friends heard about all these calamities that had befallen him, each came from his home. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could not recognize him, and they broke out into loud weeping. Each one tore his robe and threw dust into the air onto his head. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights. None spoke a word to him, for they saw how very great was his suffering.
Okay, so we have these three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And these are going to be the friends with whom he is going to dialogue now for the rest of the book. And their motivation was to help. Their motivation was to help. We're going to see whether or not they help. That's a whole different issue. And we recognize the fact that sometimes people's greatest intention is to do good, and they don't always accomplish it. Hopefully they don't damage, but they don't always accomplish it. So they wanted to go, they came together, they wanted to go and console Job. They saw how bad things were. And it was so bad that when they physically saw him, they didn't even recognize him. That's how bad things. I mean, Job had just changed into a different person. And they tore their robe and they threw dust into the air onto his head. These are all signs of mourning. And they sat with him on the ground for 7 days, 7 nights. No one spoke a word. What's interesting, by the way, is there's some halachic, there's some Jewish legal there's a Jewish legal nexus here with some of the customs of mourning, right? Of Shiva that we have here. Sitting Shiva on the ground 7 days. That's a nexus with what we know of as Jewish law, certainly from later on. And some of the rabbinic halachot, the rabbinic laws regarding mourning, quote this verse as part of what it is that guides us. And nobody spoke a word to him. Actually, they also say that it's the custom when you go into a house of mourning that you should not speak to the mourner, especially during the first 3 days. You wait for the mourner to speak to you. And that comes from this section as well. Figured we would just at least be able to see the halachic nexus to all of this kind of as we go. But this is how it starts. Job's 3 friends are going to come and are trying to console him. And this is really the end of, or towards the end of the prologue, of the second chapter. And so we go right into the beginning of the next chapter. And like good guests in a house of mourning, they don't speak until Job speaks. And now we get Job's monologue. This is Job's first speaking as we go. Let's see. Rona, do you wanna read? You have to unmute yourself, though. There you go.
Okay. Job 3:1-11. Afterward, Job began to speak and cursed the day of his birth. Job spoke up and said, "Perish the day on which I was born, and the night it was announced, a male has been conceived. May that day be darkness. May God above have no concern for it. May light not shine on it. May darkness and deep gloom reclaim it. May a pall lie over it. May what blackens the day terrify it. May obscurity carry off that night. May it not be counted among the days of the year. May it not appear in any of its months. May that night be desolate. May no sound of joy be heard in it. May those who cast spells upon the day damn it. Those prepared to disable Leviathan. May its twilight stars remain dark. May it hope for light and have none. May it not see the glimmerings of the dawn, because it did not block my mother's womb and hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not die at birth, expire as I came forth from the womb?"
Okay. So for the first time, we start to see a couple of things in chapter 3. First, we start to see the poetry that really is the main part of the book of Job. And we see that all of these conversations that we're going to have is really written in poetry. And even while this is still sort of prose, and this is the monologues, it's already moved into poetry. It's a very different feel stylistically than the first 2 chapters that we read. And what's interesting is it's almost as if, and I think it's not almost as if, it is intentional that the voice of God and the voice of Satan are in prose. The voice of human beings are in poetry as we go through the book of Job. And there's a couple of places where that doesn't play out. And I think it's intentional when it doesn't play out that way. But that's just the way this book was written. The voice of human beings is in poetry. The voice of God and Satan, for the most part, is in prose. Second thing I want to say about this is, for those of you who have a degree in psychology or psychiatry, this would be a great excursus on depression. Right? It would be very interesting. Like if I were writing a thesis for a psychology degree, I would take this these 11 verses and connect them to all of the different aspects that we see in depression. It really is so astounding how some things have never changed, and people that are in this space are in this space, and this is what they think, and this is how they, and we may say it differently, but those images of woe, I wish I had never been born. Images of light, right? I want light, and it's not there in verse 9. Images of like, I can't even hear joy anymore. I can't hear laughter. I can't hear joy that you get in verse 7. You start to really feel the depth of Job's despair. And understand at this point in time, he has lost everything. There is nothing left. He has nothing left, which is why when his friends saw him, they were so disconsolate. Other reactions. I would love to sort of hear, start a little bit more of a conversation. What do we feel from this? What do we hear in this? Where does this leave us?
Well, he's in physical pain as well as having lost everything.
Mm-hmm.
In the sections that of the final sections of the prologue, Hasatan inflicts, I guess, sores, boils all over his skin.
Yeah.
As if he's inflicting a plague, similar to the Exodus plague of boils.
Yeah, I mean, we always say if you've got your health, you've got everything. He doesn't have that even either.
Right.
Like,
and it's only then that he really feels the loss to such an extreme level as exhibited by these statements of depression.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Peter.
This is the age-old question. When we had our family incident at the end of December, what can drive the human spirit so low to ever say this? It borders almost on suicidal at this point in time, the way it's phrased. And for some of us who have fought through illness or a disease, it's a very difficult concept to understand. When I know with both of my parents, when they died, they fought for that last breath, looking for the good. And I don't see Job looking for the good in any of this. And it really bothers me, in our writings, that there are things that bring us this low.
Well, so I think what I want to say to that, Peter, is the reality is that we human beings do get to this point, right? Everyone has a breaking point. Everyone has a point at which they just can't feel, they don't feel like they can do it anymore. As many of you know, I work as part of the emergency negotiating team. And when we talk to people that are literally on the ledge, we look for what we call sort of the triple whammy, right? Most of us
don't read them this.
Most of us can handle one major thing in our life, of trauma. Many of us can handle two even. It's hard. But when there's three, we call it the triple whammy. That's when a lot of people find themselves in this place. It is just more than what our psyche can handle, right? And we protect ourselves by closing down. And it puts us, in that process of closing down, it puts us into this place. Here, he hasn't started blaming anybody yet. That's actually going to come next, right? Which we're going to show you in a second. Here, it's just, I'm alone. There's no way out. I don't feel like I can do anything. And we need people to help us get out of that. And part of the biggest challenge, I'll sort of cut to the chase a little bit here. Part of the biggest challenge of the book of Job is not that Job is here in chapter 3, because that happens to us as human beings. The challenge is what happens in chapter 42, right? That is where Job actually becomes a difficult and a challenging book that we're going to have to ask is, what is God's response to this, right? Where does that leave us? Diana, and then Saul, I need you sent me a question, and I'm not sure of the full extent of it. While Diana's talking, if you could be more specific. Diana.
Oh, okay, sure. So I don't know what happens. I mean, I read this, but it's been a very long time ago. So what I'm actually picturing here is that he's not alone. Like he has these three fellows by his side, and he's lamenting, and they're not speaking to him yet. Like it says, none spoke a word to him. They saw how much he was suffering. And I think that's really kind of beautiful that like he had this opportunity to get this out and say like, wow, this like really sucks. And then we can see like what they say, but it's one of the most beautiful parts of Judaism is that we are not alone. And we can see in COVID times, like they may tell us, okay, shelter in place and stay in your houses, but we're going to find ways to be together and know that we can comfort each other during these times and be there for one another. And that he felt comfortable emoting with these fellows is going to lead us to wherever it's going to lead us to. But I think that the backdrop is so important, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think this is in that space before anybody steps in to try and speak to him. And therefore we're hearing that. I would also say, and then we'll go to a couple of other people. I see your hands up, Marge, and then Nancy after that. There's catharsis in speaking these words as well. Of being able to get them out, just saying them sometimes helps. And if you feel like you don't have anybody to say it to, finding that person that you can actually say these things to and have them listen is okay. And
my therapist likes to say the opposite of depression is expression.
There you go. I like that. March.
So, how could we expect anything but this response? He lost his children without anything else. He just lost his children. And that's considered one of the hardest loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, we look and we say after reading chapters 1 and 2, would I be any different? Would I be any different?
Anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Nancy.
Well, I find it interesting that he says he wishes he'd never been born rather than saying he wants to die.
Right. So Saul Kempinski asked the same question, or you would think that someone who was so depressed would have suicidal thoughts. Look, I would assume that people who are involved in healthcare, if somebody said this to them, all of their flags would go up for suicide, right? He is not saying, I want to die, but I hear that, right? Now, it's interesting that he's not saying it. And Saul, part of it may be the fact that because suicide has such a stigma against it, especially in that time, right? That both the books and certainly the rabbis afterwards never went that far. But that's what I hear. I mean, he's basically saying, woe is me, I wish I never would have been alive. I'm not going to do it, but God, if you take me right now, I'm not going to complain. Right? That is what he's saying. So I hear him as being suicidal, but not suicide able. Right? He's not able to do it. Okay, well, let's go on, because this is just the woe is me place. I skipped a few verses because it's more and more and more of the same. And let's continue on with this next piece. Let's see where we are. Elisheva, you're in my place. Would you like to, my speaking box, would you like to speak?
Job 3, 2026, Job's monologue. Why does he give light to the sufferer and life to the bitter in spirit? To those who wait for death, but it does not come, who search for it more than for treasure, who rejoice to exaltation and are glad to reach the grave. To the man who has lost his way, whom God has hedged about, my groaning serves as my bread. My roaring pours forth as water, for what I feared has overtaken me. What I dreaded has come upon me. I had no repose, no quiet, no rest, and trouble came.
So we see a change here, right? Again, if we're listening, right, using our active listening skills to what it is that he's saying. In the beginning, it's, I'm in pain. I don't see anything. I don't feel anything. Now we start to feel a little bit of anger. We start to feel some finger pointing, right? Why does God continue to let me live? Right? This is blaming God. Saul, you're correct. Why does God continue to let me live? I've lost everything. And this phrase in here is actually quite, I would say, aggressive, right? Whom God has hedged about. God has just played with my life. And I've got nothing. Everything that I feared has overtaken me. Everything that I dreaded most is here. Why does God do this? So there's two different sides. It's a continuation of the same monologue. And I think a lot of times people see it as just sort of one big ranting sentiment. But I hear a real shift from the first part of this to the last part of this. Any comments on this before we start to hear what his friends are how his friends are going to respond? All right. Let's see. Cullies, would one of you like to read? Or pass? Either way.
Okay. Is this
All right.
muted?
Nope, you're on now.
Then Eliphaz the Temanite said in reply, if one ventures a word with you, will it be too much? But who can hold back his words? See, you have encouraged many. You have strengthened failing hands. Your words have kept him who stumbled from falling. You have braced knees that gave way. But now that it overtakes you, it is too much. It reaches you and you are unnerved. It is not your pity. It is not your pity.
Piety.
Your piety, your confidence, your integrity, your hope. Think now, what innocent man ever perished? Where have the upright been destroyed? As I have seen, those who plow evil and sow mischief reap them. They perish by a blast from God, are gone at the breath of his nostrils. The lion may roar, the cub may howl, but the teeth of the king of beasts are broken. The lion perishes for lack of prey, and its whelps are scattered.
Okay. So what do we make of this? What is Eliphaz saying to him? What is Eliphaz's response?
He has usually been helping others, encouraging others, and now he cannot help himself.
So yeah, I think the beginning of this is Eliphaz saying, look, first of all, I like his intro, right? I mean, you know, he asked permission to speak to him. He doesn't assume, and that's already a good thing. But But then he kind of goes off in a strange direction. Look, you've done great things. You've encouraged many people. When you were on this side of it, everything was fine. But now that it overtakes you, you're kvetching. It's too much, right? It reaches you and you are unnerved. So the first part about all of this is, you know, you've done all of this for other people. You're on the other side now. Maybe Eliphaz is saying, listen to what you would have said, right? What would you have said if you were in that position, in that place? But the second part of this, right? I almost divided it into two, but it was just too many different slides. Starting from verse 7 on is a change here. Think now, what innocent man ever perished? Where have the upright been destroyed? Right? You're blaming God for this, but God is always correct. Maybe there's something you did wrong. When has the wicked, when has the innocent ever been punished? The upright been destroyed? Right? There must have been something that you've done. I have seen those who plow evil and sow mischief reap them. So if this is going on, this is a very classic response to evil from the biblical period and even into the early rabbinic period. If there's bad things that are happening, it's because you did something, right? If there's a drought, if we look at the second paragraph of the Shema, it's because we're not observing the commandments. We better get our act together if we want the rain to fall. Cullis.
So this goes, how does this fall in with the idea that bad things happen to good people?
That is the question, right? That's the question of Job, right? That we're trying to answer. Eliphaz's first answer is bad things don't happen to good people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's his seeming response here, is that bad things don't happen to good people. There's a reason. There's a reason for everything. So it's interesting. I remember, I've forgotten about this for so long. In this conversation, it's bringing back the memory very vividly for me. I was in my rabbinical school interviews, right? To get into rabbinical school many, many years ago now. And I was sitting in front of a panel of 5 rabbis, 3 teachers from the school and 2 rabbis from the general community. Actually, 1 rabbi from the general community and 1 educator. And they were the panel that would recommend acceptance into the rabbinical school. And as part of the question, as part of this, they asked you different questions. And I remember them saying, you know, what would you say to a parent of a child who has died of cancer, who is asking, why did God do this? And, you know, I remember thinking, there's no answer that I can give that I thought would be sufficient. I now know that that's the right answer, right? After 20-something years of being a rabbi here and almost 30 years in the rabbinate, right? 25 years in the rabbinate. There really isn't any single answer that's sufficient. But I remember at that moment thinking, like, there's nothing I can say to this person that is going to make it. And so, you know, I struggled and I came up with something. Obviously, it was good enough. I got in. But I remember that feeling of there are certain things that there's nothing you can say, right? And this to me is not the right answer of saying, well, you must have done something wrong. I also
Not the right answer.
I also personally find very a poor answer. Well, God has a plan. I believe God does have a plan, but that's not an answer to somebody who's suffering right now. Because you need to understand how you fit into that plan. Okay, I see some people have their hands up. So Mike and then Peter.
Are you calling on me or the other Mike?
Sorry, Mike Derschlag. Yes, you have
Okay.
your hand.
So I'm looking at just this section you have on the screen, and maybe looking at the second part a little differently,
Go ahead.
or at least the possibility, because I haven't read the rest. Okay, so if you look at verse 7, it says, "Think now, what innocent man has ever perished? Where have the upright been destroyed?" So maybe what he's saying in the second part is
If you're innocent.
not that you're complaining about it, but just that, if you're a good person, so just think about it. If you're a good person, eventually God will reward you. You may have had some things that have happened to you, but continue to be the kind of person you are, and things will work out okay. Now, I don't know what the rest of his speech says.
Right.
So I'm not sure, but I'm just looking at this second part, thinking maybe it could be that.
It is a possible read, Mike. I'm not going to say it's not. I certainly can see it that way. It really depends on how you read verse 8 then, right? Because if you read verse 8 as a continuation of the thought, then yeah, those who have plowed evil, so mischief reap them, therefore you're reaping because you have done evil. If you read it as not a continuation of the thought, but a mirror, an opposite, then you can read it that way. So it really kind of depends on how you read verse 8. But I think it could be read either way. Peter.
Yeah.
My question really is why do I hear a lot of the Haftorah from Jonah in this, where it's woe is me, really? Again, it's driving the human condition down to such levels of depression that it's hard to recover. And Crocodile Dundee is right. You need a lot of mates around at that point in time in your life to bring you out from these depths that the human condition can fall to. And it's a very difficult.
Yeah. So there is connection between Jonah and Job, right? Job is seen as the suffering servant, so to speak, and Jonah is seen as the reluctant prophet, but there certainly is some overall connection. And by the way, it may be interesting, if we have time at the end, it may be interesting to bring the last part of Jonah and compare it to the last part of Job, right? What's God's response to Jonah and what's God's response to Job? You're actually going to see some similarities there. Okay, let's continue on. We're making okay time, but I want to make sure that we have the chance to get through everything. So now we're going to see the first response, right? Or one of the first responses. This is from the 6th chapter. So chapter 4, chapter 5, were his friends talking to him. And now chapter 6, we get the response. Diana, do you want to read?
Sure. Dialogues, Job 6:1-13. Then Job said in reply, "If my anguish were weighted, my full calamity laid on the scales, it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. That is why I spoke recklessly, for the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit absorbs their poison. God's terrors are arrayed against me. Does a wild ass bray when he has grass? Does a bull bellow over his fodder? Can what is tasteless be eaten without salt? Does mallow juice have any flavor? I refuse to touch them. They are like food when I am sick. Would that my request be granted, that God gave me what I wished for? Would that God consented to crush me, loosed his hand, and cut me off? Then this would be my consolation, as I writhe in unsparing pains, that I did not suppress my words against the Holy One. What strength have I that I should endure? How long have I to live that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of a rock? Is my flesh bronze? Truly, I cannot help myself. I've been deprived of resourcefulness.
Okay.
Wow.
So we see in this he heard a little bit of what his friends were saying, right? He did hear, he responded. It's one of the things that when I'm speaking to somebody who's in that state, right? Are they actually hearing the words that I'm saying, or are they just so tunnel vision they don't even hear that I'm there? Right? Because at that point in time, then I need to do something to try and get through that tunnel vision. But so Joseph said, look, you know, I hear what you're saying. I see what you're trying to say to me. And that there is goodness that's there. But the food is like food when I'm sick, right? I know intellectually that food is good and it's good for me, but I can't eat it. I can't eat it, right? So I hear what you're saying, but it's just too much. This last section, 11, 12, 13, is really sort of a famous section of Job. What strength have I that I should endure? How long have I to live that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of a rock, right? I'm a human being. I have limits. I have a point at which I can't go beyond. And yet I'm being pushed to that point. So I am going to bring responses of his friends or words of his friends. I am cognizant that I brought them, that they are out of order. In other words, we're going to look at Job chapter 22, and then we're going to look at an earlier chapter, only because there's a lot of repetition in the patterns, and I wanted to pick the ones that I thought really were kind of highlights. But it's going back and forth and back and forth. So I've crafted a little bit of the back and forth here, knowing that it's out of order. We're going to look at Job 22 now, and see what his friends are trying to say to him. Let's see, where are we? Rivka, do you want to continue?
Okay.
There you go.
Job 22, 12 to 14. God is in the heavenly heights. See the highest stars, how lofty. You say, what can God know? Can he govern through the dense cloud? The clouds screen him so he cannot see as he moves about the circuit of heaven.
Keep going.
Be close to him and wholehearted. Good things will come to you thereby. Accept instruction from his mouth. Lay up his words in your heart. If you return to Shaddai, you will be restored. If you banish iniquity from your tent.
So this is a continuation, and the reality is that Job's friends really, for the most part, respond by saying, you know, suck it up, stick with it, reach out to God, because ultimately that is your only source of strength and salvation, right? And God can see, in spite of the fact that you don't think God can see, right? You say, what can God know? Can God govern through a dense cloud? That's this sign of, well, God doesn't really know what's going on. And they're saying, no, God can see. Be close to God, be wholehearted, listen to what God is saying, and things will get better. That is really where his friends are for the most part. They'll try to do some other things, but they always come back to this theme at the end. So Job, somebody was going to say something?
Oh, I just had a question.
Go ahead.
Is this like where some of the concept of like Kiruv comes from? Is this like maybe part of what inspired Chassidut and being close to God, and sort of that whole positivity bias, like good things will come to you when you become closer to God. Like
I think so, but I don't know that it necessarily comes from Job. There are other books that put that forward a lot stronger, a lot more clearly. Right. So I think
this is pretty clear. Like
this jives with it, but it's not. It's in the midst of all the trouble, right? This may be this. You may find. I would say and I didn't look to this. We can look on Sefaria. My guess is we probably will find a lot of Musar literature connected to this verse.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's inspired a lot, and I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, I would say so. I didn't look at that this time. Mike Derschlag.
Yeah. So can we recap for a minute here? Job starts out as a man sort of like Noah, right? He's a man without fault. He does good. He loves God. He worships God. He does everything right. God notices him and says he's a great guy. And then Satan comes to God and says, hey, let me just mess around with him a little bit, okay? God says, sure, go ahead.
Well, hold on. Let me stop you there, because the reasoning behind it is important. Satan said he wouldn't be so good if he didn't have all your blessings.
Okay.
Right? And ultimately, Satan's right. He's complaining and he's kvetching and he's saying, woe is me. He's given up. Right? When all those blessings, when all those things were taken away, ultimately, Satan is correct here.
Yeah.
He doesn't entirely turn his back.
Yeah, it just kind of bothers me that, here's a person without fault that's doing good by God. And, God uses him as an experiment, so to speak. Says, okay, go let's see what happens with this guy.
Yeah.
Whereas there are probably plenty of other people on earth that aren't so good that he could say, okay, let's see what happens with them. And so how do the, what's the interpretation of that? How the rabbis feel about the way he was treated as an individual?
Well, that's the $1 million question of the book of Job, right? We started this by saying, this is theodicy. This is the problem of evil. And why do good people suffer?
Yeah.
Right? When we get the answer to that, we get the answer to the big question. Right? But it's a good question. There have been a couple of texts that have come out. Peter asks why Shaddai versus the 4-letter, the tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God. Different names are used by different authors and to mean different things. Rivka is correct. Shaddai is often seen, Shaddai is seen not so much always as the nurturer. Often Shaddai is seen as the almost the military leader, right? It's like Adonai Tzvaot and El Shaddai are seen as the strong God. So it may not be the nurturer, but you may be right, Rivka, that using the name Shaddai is trying to bring out an aspect of God to give a particular message. Okay. So a reply of Job. Again, this is earlier, but the reply is consistent all the way through. Let's see, where are we? Are we now? Greg or Fran, do you want to continue?
Job, you're done? Go ahead. Job 16, 1-6. Job said in reply, I have often heard such things. You are all mischievous comforters. Have windy words no limit? What afflicts you that you speak on? I would also talk like you if you were in my place. I would barrage you with words. I would wag my head over you. I would encourage you with my words. My moving lips would bring relief. If I speak, my pain will not be relieved. And if I do not, what have I lost?
Okay. So I brought this just to show that Job is aware of what's going on. He's aware of what his friends are trying to do. He's aware of the situation. It's not that he's so closed off that he doesn't realize it, right? He's saying, look, you guys, I hear what you're trying to do. And if I were in your place, I'd probably be saying the same thing. But these are windy words. They're blowing. There's nothing there. There's nothing there behind it. And if I speak, my pain, I think they're at this point, they're trying to get Job to share and to speak and to talk. It's like, if I speak, my pain is not going to be relieved, but if I don't, what have I lost? Like, I don't know. I'm kind of in this place where there's no way out. There's this no way out place that Job has here. So what we've done is we've gone from our prologue, right? Our introduction that sets the stage, and Mike Durschlag was right to say, it's a difficult situation, right? It seems like God is just sort of saying, I kind of feel like for those who like movies and movie quotes, and so I was talking about this in my last class, for those who like the movie Trading Places, with, it's like these people ruined their life over $1. It was a dollar bet, right? It's kind of like, I get that feeling here. God and Satan are sitting, talking. It's like, all right, well, let's see what happens. And meanwhile, poor Job has lost everything, right? And there seems to be this emotional disconnect. And I want you to remember that, because one of the ways that we can make sense of the bad things in this world, right? One of the ways that people do is by basically emotionally disconnecting God from us. How do we do that? God has a plan, right? That's an emotional disconnect. That's not a God cares about you and what you're feeling. That's a God has a plan. And so that's one of the ways. And we're going to see that Job, to some degree, the book of Job, the author here emotionally disconnects God, at least maybe until the end. We'll see how it all ends. And you'll tell me at the end if you feel that God has come back in and become emotionally invested or not. But that's one of the ways that we might respond to making sense of all of the suffering. So we started with that. We then moved into Job is broken, and chapter 3 is this monologue where Job finally says, I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. And then it shifts as he's talking into, you did this to me, God, right? Pointing that finger. And then his friends finally speak up, because his friends had been silent until they heard from him. His friends finally speak up, and they start to try to put this into context. And it doesn't really matter what they do. Job just can't hear it. He tries. Every once in a while, you see him sort of saying, well, your words make sense. But ultimately, he comes back to the same place of, I've got nowhere to go. There's nothing here, right? Saul Kempinski wrote, interestingly, the Orthodox narrative to a heroic response to the Shoah was Kiddush Hashem, right? That in the Holocaust, that those people who have lost their lives, really the response was, well, they suffered Kiddush Hashem, to honor God's name, to support God's name, right? But we don't see that here. And you're right, Saul, right? That's not a narrative that you see in how the rabbis respond to the book of Job. And so, or at least not overtly. I'm sure there are some that are out there, but that's not the main thrust of the narrative here. So that's where we are, right? We're in this place of as low as possibly can be, And his friends are trying to help him. His friends are trying to lift him out of it. His friends are trying to make him see a larger context, and nothing is working. And nothing is working. And this goes on for tens of chapters, back and forth. It is the meat and potatoes of this book. It's what this is what most of the book is. Next week, I may have one or two other texts from the dialogues, but we're going to now start to move into the last monologues of the friends of Job and of God in all of this until we get to our conclusion. And we'll see the conclusion next week. Because then the week after that, we're going to talk about Satan and then try to make some sense out of all of this. I know we're going through this book very quickly. I know we're just scratching the surface of it. And as I said in the beginning, I encourage you, go to the beginning of this chat. You'll see the link on Sepharia, or go to the texts that I shared with you last time. Read it for yourself. There's a lot more, a lot of richness. We could spend a whole year, just delving into all the chapters of Job. But this was meant to be just an appetizer, a taste. Any questions?
Okay, at the risk of jumping ahead, because I did read Job before in preparation for this class. Are you going to skip the dialogues where Job repeatedly, strongly represents himself as blameless, and God has caused all of this?
Yes, the answer is yes. I'm ultimately going to skip it, but thank you for bringing it up. I mean, we touched at it a little bit before when his friends were sort of saying, well, the innocent don't get, and then one of Job's responses, well, I'm innocent, and therefore God must be wrong. So that's sort of the response to the friends, right?
Right.
And how they manage that. So there's just too much to go through, but yes, you're right on, Michael, that is absolutely a part of this. Elisheva, I think I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe yes. Like this is very conflictive, because I mean, that's how I feel. As we are talking about God and Satan, but I cannot stop thinking about how there are good people and there are bad people. And this is kind of the bad seed among people that start to talk about a good person and start to bring in, it's not gossip, it's just saying, why is this person so good? Does he have a good life? Or why is this person so successful? And then there is the black seed there that pushes to bring bad to the good person. I don't know if I explain myself clearly,
I mean,
but I cannot stop thinking about it.
Yeah, Elisheva, what you're thinking about is a very classic rabbinic understanding of Lashon Hara, right, of evil speech. And they say, the rabbis say, that even saying something good about somebody, right, could be considered to be gossip or Lashon Hara. Why? Because you say, wow, he's the best doctor in the world. Well, he's a human being, and at some point in time, he's not going to be the best doctor. And then somebody's going to say, he's the worst doctor. He's not the best doctor, right? So even saying something positive and good might even, lend itself to that. Go ahead, Elisheva.
But it's not only Lashon Hara. It's just also like someone saying, this person probably won't be so good if, like the words of Satan to God, right? This person would not be so good or would not be so positive if something bad would happen. It's kind of, it's not only Lashon Hara, it's provoking that something
But here's the challenge, and I'll challenge you guys to think about this. Satan was right. Satan was right. When everything was taken away, Job lost his faith. Right? And so the question here is, right, which one of the characters, here's the challenge for you. Let's take God and Satan out of it, because that creates such a problem for us theologically or whatever. Let's just say we were reading a novel, a fictional novel, right? Which one of the characters was right and promoting truth here? Ultimately, Satan. Because he ultimately was right. God was wrong. God basically said, no, Satan, Job is going to be great no matter what. And it was God that was misguided in all of this. I want you to think about that as we sort of try to grapple with all of this. And I know I just dropped a huge comment right at the end, and there's people with their hands up. Tom, Peter, and then before we get to that, Mike Frank said Job would respond as he did because humans have limits. Mike Frank, thank you. Yeah, and you are correct. Tom.
Great. I was going to say that we keep talking about the question, why do good things happen to, bad things happen to good people? But we could also say, was Job really a good person if he didn't have true intentions? So, and what is a good thing or a bad thing? But I mean, maybe the question is incorrect to begin with, if Job was that kind of person.
Well, to some degree, I think that's what his friends are saying to him, right? Of, look, when you had everything was great, but now that you don't, you turn your back on God. Like, what's up with that? And that is to some degree, Tom, I think what his friends are trying to say to him. Peter.
I hear the four sons, and from Pesach, from the story, that they are all attributes of the same human condition. Just like Satan and God have to exist together because of the fact that one can't have good without having evil. So I kind of hear all these being attributes, the yin and the yang from Eastern tradition. You need one without, and you can't have one without the other, because we wouldn't know the heights, and we wouldn't know the depths of the human condition.
I agree with your statement. I think the challenge is going to be, when is it necessary, right? Ultimately,
I think it's necessary all the time. I think we can't appreciate one without appreciating the other, of how far we can fall and how far we can rise as human beings.
Maybe.
And now it's the question of how far can you fall that you're tackling until you can rise back up.
It's good.
And it's a difficult point to understand.
Yeah, I like that, Peter. I like that. Rivka, I'll get you 1 second. Wayne makes a comment, and I think it's interesting from a literary perspective, right? In some ways, it seems like the stories we read about Greek mythology, with everything being a little arbitrary and capricious, and it's just like whatever whims the god that particular god has at the moment. Or Rebecca's comment, thank you. But I think that certainly we're dealing with a shared knowledge of literature, right? And so this is the time that those things were being written. And so it's all being written at the same time. So the fact that there's some similarities there is not surprising. Rivka, I'm going to let you have the last word or the last question, and then we will cut it from here.
I wanted to ask, did Job really lose his faith, or did he just question his relationship with God and who God was? Is questioning the same thing as losing that?
Rivka, I think you are asking if the question before was the $1 million question, you're asking the $10 million question.
Okay.
And I think that is the question we need to ask and answer by the end of this class. Right? So keep it, ask it again in 2 weeks.
Yes, sir.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I will see you guys next week. And Peter, I did not forget about that verse from the Da Vinci Codes, but it's actually in one of the monologues at the end. It's in one of the later chapters, so we haven't gotten to it yet. All right, all. Have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye,
Rabbi.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Did,
you.
Bye.
Bye.
did you get
Thank
did
you.
you get did you
Thank
get the
you.
email I sent you?
Thank you.
Rabbi?
Who's asking?
It's Diana.
Hi, Diana.
Hi. There's no rush on it, but just and
Which
it's not for
email?
this class, but it was about the tzitz and how that would work.
Oh, you know what? I did, and I have to tell you, I don't think I understand it any better than you do.
Okay. It's so Harry Potter to me. Like I didn't know.
It was very confusing to me.
Okay.
And because I'm focusing so much right now on Masechet Gitin,
Mhm.
I didn't really look into it. Now, normally I would have looked into it and looked at the Rishonim, but I didn't get it. I just sort of said, all right, I don't get it, and I moved on.
Okay.
So I don't have much more answer for you. Maybe if we find some time in the next couple of weeks, you and I can sit down and we can do a little study and try to figure it out.
We can figure out how this thing works.
Yeah.
I'm like, is it like the Control Z that the Kohanim use? Because I need it sits in my life to
I
fit.
know. Yeah, I didn't get it. I didn't get it.
All right.
I put a lot of time into it.
No problem. I also asked Hetty, I said, can you ask Ralph? He's a Kohen. He should know these things. Because, when we're all there, in the third Beit HaMikdash, he's going to be like,
he's going
to be tzitzing us. So he needs to know what to do.
All right, everyone.
Have a
Bye.
good week. Bye.